It that way. Asians are suspect, but the innate form of politeness in their culture grants them some concealment. Worst of all, Native Americans are being denied their heritage. Sacred native lands are routinely being despoiled for oil, and even their citizenship is being stripped from them. See South Dakota stripping votes from Native Americans because they live on reservations and have no official address. It's hard to get more idiotic in subjecting others for your own political gain. The picture becomes even more cloudy and troubling when we check in on the more current aspects of the sexual revolution. LBGQT idea that you are neither better nor worse than anyone. You deserve the same rights as everyone else. Equal rights is our topic. Judgments about your value as a human being are a separate topic from believing that a biased view is sufficient to give you lesser rights. First, a word about my book, Ubuntu I Am Because We Are, which is available on Amazon and wherever books are sold, and presents the only peaceful method available to redirect where we are headed. Check it out on my website, johnkelch.com. That's JOHNKOELSCH.com. Our society exists in a complex division of us against them commitments. Men and women struggle, us against them, because of the tremendous difficulties they experience in considering the other side to be fair and honest about equality. Women face a glass ceiling on their accomplishments despite outstanding skills and abilities. Although this is and has been changing for the last half century, there are fewer women in top CEO positions in the Senate and the House of Representatives, none as president or vice president, and even less than half at the Supreme Court are women. The mountain of inequality has not been topped, and on a daily basis, many men treat women as second class, inferior, and below them. Their ideas, opinions, and beliefs don't count. On the other hand, many men bear, to a lesser extent, the brunt of women categorizing them as being abusive and derogatory towards women simply because they are men, so they must be misogynistic. Minorities face discrimination daily, although that too has improved somewhat in the last 50 years. Young black men face a greater possibility of being shot by police than white men. This is true whether they are doing nothing wrong or maybe committing a crime. The police, with an us against them mentality, are more prepared to use deadly force if the suspect is black. I've supervised police departments in 6 local governments and witnessed this attitude personally. It is not a rallying cry, but it is a real perception on the part of many officers. Hispanics have been classified as rapists and killers by the president, and they suffer discrimination in much the same fashion, although perhaps with slightly less emphasis. I'm pretty sure they don't see it that way. Asians are suspect, but the innate form of politeness in their culture grants them some concealment. Worst of all, Native Americans are being denied their heritage. Sacred native lands are routinely being despoiled for oil, and even their citizenship is being stripped from them. See South Dakota stripping votes from Native Americans because they live on reservations and have no official address. It's hard to get more idiotic in subjecting others for your own political gain. The picture becomes even more cloudy and troubling when we check in on the more current aspects of the sexual revolution. LGBTQT issues and attempts at making discrimination legal continue to clash. The Supreme Court did approve same-sex marriage. This was followed by Kentucky Rowan County Clerk Kim Davis promptly refusing to issue marriage licenses to gay couples. A firestorm ensued, resulting in a change to Kentucky law not requiring the clerk to sign a license. A lawsuit which Kentucky lost and had to pay the legal costs for, Davis losing her job, and both couples who were plaintiffs being married. At about the same time, the refusal of a baker to make a wedding cake for a gay couple erupted into the media with the question of, do I have a right to not do my job if it violates my religious beliefs? More properly, the question should be, are my biases justification for refusing to do my job? The religious part is not germane, because it is the source of the bias, and not the justification for the action. I don't believe the Bible has any passage that says, thou shalt not bake a cake for someone whose behavior doesn't meet your approval. Also, I find no quotes about homosexuality in the Bible by Jesus. More recently, per Reuters, on December 2nd, Zola began airing 6 ads on Hallmark, 4 of which featured a lesbian couple. On December 11th, Crown Media notified Zola those 4 ads would no longer be airing with the explanation that Crown Media is, quote, not allowed to accept creatives that are deemed controversial, unquote. The chief executive officer of Hallmark Cards apologized on Sunday night and said the company would reverse an earlier decision to pull television advertisements featuring same-sex couples from the wedding registry and planning website Zola. Hallmark Channel faced a public outcry after it pulled the ads last week under pressure from the conservative group of 1 million moms. The decision to pull the ads prompted reactions from thousands of Twitter users, as well as Democratic presidential contender Pete Buttigieg, comedian Ellen DeGeneres, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and streaming company Netflix. The LGBTQ advocacy group GLAAD launched a boycott, and the hashtag Boycott Hallmark Channel hashtag was featured in over 16,000 tweets. The only difference between the commercials that were flagged and the ones that were approved was that the commercials did not meet Hallmark standards, including a lesbian couple kissing, wrote Mike Chi, Zola's chief marketing officer, in a statement prior to Hallmark's reversal. It's reporting by Helen Koster, editing by Chris Reese, under our standards, the Thomson Reuters Trust Principles. Then you have President Trump jumping into the fray with a ruling banning transgender people from serving in the military. His tweet setting this policy was followed by a disorganized scramble of military leadership trying to justify why being a transgender hindered the ability to defend our country. This effort, of course, flies in the face of the active, honorable service in the armed forces of thousands of openly transgender individuals. I would note, as a combat veteran, I can assure you that the thought of the sexual proclivities and gender identification of anyone I served with in combat fighting the enemy never occurred to me. I only wanted to accomplish our assigned mission and keep all of my people alive. This required watching the other guy's back, not his butt or other portions of anatomy. Equality is trash for a wide variety of reasons, including sexual identity, sexual preference, race, nationality, and religious belief or non-belief. Competing in the 2020 presidential campaign, we have a number of women, and acknowledged homosexual, Roman Catholics, Jewish raised, Quaker, Baptist Hindu Jewish combined, and a few acknowledging spirituality on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, we have Christian billionaires and Trump who profess all sorts of things, but doesn't actually appear to believe any religion except for being the chosen one, of course. No one professing to be an atheist is anywhere to be seen, and I expect those claiming to be spiritual rather than professing a faith would, if truthful, fall into the new category of non-faith. This category is the fastest growing one in our country. I'm not speaking for or against any belief. Human beings require belief, and belief is the glue which holds the structure of human organizations together. Rather, I would note how often belief is used to treat others unequally, to deny them the same rights you have simply because you perceive they don't comply with your beliefs and are therefore lesser beings not entitled to equal rights. How can we proudly claim our country is dedicated to the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness equally for all, and then turn in our actions shout, quote, but not for those people, unquote? This is the height of hypocrisy. In the 1919 elections, my state, Virginia, experienced a significant shift in power between the parties in the State House. Democrats will control the governor's office in both houses of the legislature when they are sworn in. An unexpected issue surged into view at that time. It was the possibility of reviving and approving the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution from 1972. Interesting as this was, it is very unlikely to occur. It does not denote an interest in the issue of equality. Passing it at this point, as presented almost a half a century ago, would also be less than adequate. We need a constitutional amendment that includes the following. 1. Equality of rights under the law shall not be abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex, race, gender identification, sexual orientation, or religious belief or non-belief. 2. Inner conscious or religious belief shall not be a defense for refusal to provide a service for which payment is given. Reminder, a word about my book, Ubuntu I Am Because We Are, which is available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. It presents the only peaceful method available to redirect where we are headed. Check it out on my website, johnkelsch.com. That's JOHNKOELSCH.com. Lest you think I consider this to be an easy thing to accomplish, I offer the following for your edification. In 1972, while working as an intern for the Kentucky Legislative Research Commission through the Frankfurt Administrative Intern Program, I had the privilege of being a quiet observer of the legislature's consideration in special session of the proposed Equal Rights Amendment. My position allowed me to be present as a non-participant in every official meeting on the topic. As long as I sat quietly, I remained virtually unnoticed. To set the stage, the state of Kentucky holds a regular legislative session for 60 days every 2 years. An old Kentucky joke is that we would all be better off if they met 2 days every 60 years. At this point in 1972, the governor called a 7-day special session to consider 2 major issues and a half dozen minor issues. The minor issues could have waited, but they added political justification for calling the session. Politicians do not object to this type of tactic. The 2 major issues were the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution and a major funding bill, which was a key component of operating the state of Kentucky for the next 2 years. The bill had been passed in the previous regular session, but had, in some inexplicable manner, been physically lost before the governor could actually sign it. It had to be passed again. The Equal Rights Amendment was, of course, toxic then as it is now. It was hotter than any southern barbecue and made people tipsy and devoid of their senses faster than the finest Kentucky moonshine. The proceedings commenced. The Equal Rights Amendment was considered first in the House of Representatives. Everyone knew it would pass there and the real battle would be in the Senate. Nonetheless, people wanted to have their position on record and tensions were running high. I sat in the gallery set on a balcony for observers set around the chamber. This led to my witnessing an amazing event. A representative arose and requested of the chair the privilege of introducing a guest in the gallery. The privilege was granted. The representative spoke to his colleagues. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I consider it a true privilege to introduce to you the finest lady, the most attractive woman I have ever known, my wife. He waved to a striking lady high up in the gallery. She had beautiful raven black hair framing her lovely face. She was tall and as shapely as a prize-winning Kentucky filly, as wags would put it. She was situated across the chamber from me on the other side of the gallery. I appreciated her prize-winning qualities. Everyone, including me, started to applaud, but another representative rose and shouted, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I must rise in protest and request permission to speak. Everyone was confused. Much yelling and milling about commenced. The speaker gavelled order. Everyone quieted down. He elected first one representative, then the other. This is a most unusual request for merely introducing a guest. However, I see no reason not to allow it. Sir, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your gracious ruling. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I feel that it is my honor-bound duty to advise you of what I know. I had the privilege of dining last year during Derby Week in Louisville with the representative and his wife. As you know, such an event will always be a memorable one for the fine dining and the good Kentucky bourbon during a week when the finest stallions in the land will compete at the premier event in the world. And so it was, an evening I shall always treasure. Therefore, it is with the deepest sadness in my heart that I must inform the members of this House that having dined with the representative and his lovely wife, I can attest that the woman in the gallery is not the same woman. He thumped his desk and took a seat. The crowd resumed yelling and milling and added throwing a few things. As a combat veteran, I quickly looked for a pillar to cover behind. This was Kentucky, and some of those representatives carried guns onto the floor. They had been known to use them in the past. After several minutes of pounding, the Speaker gavelled the House into a semblance of order. This behavior is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Any further outbursts will result in appropriate retribution and punishment. He gavelled again, and quiet prevailed. The first representative stood and raised his hand to be recognized. Slowly the speaker shook his head and glared at everyone in the room. Finally he acknowledged the representative. "Mr. Speaker, I feel I must be allowed to respond to this outrageous accusation. Honor requires it." The speaker considered. "I am reluctant to occupy more of the member's time with this. However, since honor requires, I must do so. Make it brief. You have the floor." "Mr. Speaker, thank you for both the kindness and wisdom in your ruling. I promise I will be brief. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I can only say that woman is my wife. She just changed her hairstyle." The House erupted in laughter. Later that afternoon, my supervisor informed me that the stage routine was actually based on a real event that had occurred decades earlier. I asked how the real event turned out. Well, friends of both men worked hard and persuaded them that it really wasn't worth fighting a duel over, even though the woman in question had been a mistress of the man who challenged and really wasn't married to anyone. Eventually, their friendship restored, they enjoyed many fine meals together during Derby Week in Louisville. The next day, the House passed the Equal Rights Amendment, and it was sent to the Senate. You now have some historical context. The fun was about to begin. The Senate promptly referred the matter to committee. The committee convened at 8:30 the next morning. I sat in the corner watching. They promptly discovered that no one was willing to make a motion to discuss the bill, let alone act on it. Senator D. Huddleston, the majority leader who was running for the United States Senate, spent several hours discussing the matter, first with the chairman and then with each committee member. The committee reconvened at 11 o'clock. I sat on the same chair. The members stared at each other and sat silently, with no one willing to utter a word, lest it be ruled as a motion to consider. They adjourned at 12:30 for lunch. Senator Huddleston conducted further conversations. The committee reconvened at 3. I sat in the same chair. I had a great view from there. I watched 6 members sit with lips sealed while the chairman pleaded, cajoled, and generally carried on about how they needed to do their patriotic duty. Silence ruled. They adjourned. Amazingly, they reconvened at 6. Senator Huddleston apparently couldn't force them to act, but he could make them sit in that room. Personally, I was finding my chair to be less than comfortable. At 7, they adjourned. The chairman had said, "This committee is called to order." An hour later, he said, "This committee meeting is adjourned." In the interim, no one, including me, had said a single word. The members left for their respective abodes. I hung around a while because, as a quiet witness, who was essentially a total non-entity in the matter, no one paid any attention to me. My instincts paid off, and I learned that D. Huddleston was slated to have a conference that night with the Secretary of State. My supervisor promised to call me with the results of that meeting no matter what time it was. I went home and sacked out with the phone only a few feet away. At that time, the Kentucky Secretary of State was a lady named Thelma Stovall. She was a tough politico and extremely powerful in the politics of the state. I figured that meeting would be fascinating and wished I could have been a quiet witness for that. It was clear there would be only 2 people in that room. Darn. My phone blared out at freaking 3 a.m. in the very early morning. The committee would meet at 5, and the Equal Rights Amendment would be sent to the full Senate with no recommendation. "How did Thelma make that happen?" I asked. My supervisor responded. Apparently, she simply told D that if he couldn't get the amendment on the floor for a vote, he couldn't be her United States Senator. I'm not sure what he told members of the committee, but it seems like it was effective. I was in my chair promptly at 5. The chairman convened the committee. Only the chairman and 2 other members were present. Words do not exist to describe the deep tenor of the silence of the next 5 minutes. Finally, the chairman slapped the table. He pointed to one member. "You make the motion." The member mumbled, "So moved." The chairman pointed at the other member. "You second the motion." The member whispered, "Second." The chairman, "All in favor say aye." 1 aye and 2 coughs were heard. All opposed say nay. Silence for at least 2 milliseconds. Chairman, "No opposition. The motion passes. The bill goes to the floor for debate without any recommendation." He gavelled once. Meeting adjourned. The preamble completed, the battle was set to begin. The initial debate was set to begin at 1 o'clock. It was to decide whether or not the bill should be voted on for final passage. There were 3 days left in the special session. Debate continued all afternoon into the evening. Memorable moments included the inevitable warning by a very conservative senator that, quote, as sure as we pass this bill, you know that somewhere in this state some damn long-haired hippie will go into some restaurant and demand to use the woman's bathroom. Reactions to that comment ranged from laughter to derisive shouts of shut up, sit down, and, quote, that means more toilet paper in the men's room, unquote. A black woman senator gave an impassioned speech focused on how long would this inequality continue. While she gave a good speech, she blew it on a technicality. She referred to women as a minority. Several senators responded with comments such as, more of you than there are of us, a fact determined by nature, not legislation, that had nothing to do with equality, but negated an otherwise fine speech. Speeches continued into the evening. Fascinating, but not moving anybody much of anywhere. There was a moment when one senator questioned the idea of women serving in combat. A shouted response of, what do you care, you're too chicken to serve, shut him down. They adjourned at 7 o'clock. I went back to my supervisor to find out what was likely to happen. Passage is in the bag. We'll see how the legislature really works, he explained the scenario. I went home for a good night's sleep and was back in the gallery when they opened the session at 9. The meeting was taken up with more speeches, mostly silly. When the afternoon session began at 1, the opponents fired with their biggest gun. They moved for adjournment sine die. The motion required no second, had to be voted on, and would shut down the special session without any other votes. Senator Housen rose to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, this is very simple. We have not taken up the expenditure bill, and we must pass it. If we fail to do so, portions of state government will shut down. The governor will be forced to call another very costly session, and the fallout from that will be on your heads. We must reject the motion. Debate continued for some time, but in the end, the motion failed. Several motions to consider the expenditure bill were shut down by the majority leader before a second was recognized. The Senate returned to the Equal Rights Amendment. Debate on that went on for several more hours. During this time, Julian Carroll, the lieutenant governor, took the chair. He would be running for governor in the next election. There were 38 senators, and a vote of 1919 would require Julian to cast the deciding vote. The vote began. I had picked my spot carefully to be able to watch both Julian and a senator from western Kentucky. It was close. The senator I watched voted against the bill. The count was 20 to 18 against. Before anyone could blink, Julian hit the gavel and recognized the senator from western Kentucky. He rose and changed his vote to for the bill. The vote was 1919. Julian had to decide. He rose to speak. Basically, he talked of courage and the necessity to man up and vote. I believe there is a time to vote, and this is that time. I vote for the bill to be considered for passage, he thundered. He banged his gavel and sat down quickly. The vote for passage was scheduled for late the next day. I was in my seat early, in position to watch Julian and another senator from the middle of the state. The opposition made numerous procedural motions to block the bill. All were futile and failed. The time came to vote on passage. Tension was high. If the count was 19 to 19, it would be up to Julian to cast the deciding vote. 1919! Twice as quickly as the day before, Julian banged the gavel and recognized the senator I was keeping an eye on. That individual rose quickly and changed his vote. The Equal Rights Amendment had passed, 20 to 18. The first vote-changing senator reaped a significant political harvest and probably did well financially, if not getting the keys to Fort Knox. The second vote-changing senator reaped a tremendous political bounty and likely got the keys to Fort Knox for an overnight visit. Julian Carroll ran for governor and was able to speak to ERA supporters and remind them that it was his vote that allowed the bill to be considered for passage. To opponents, he was able to blandly note that he had no say in the actual passage. He was elected governor. His tenure was marked by some financial inconsistencies. Dee Huddleston was elected senator United States Senator from Kentucky, and he had a spectacularly undistinguished career in that position. Thomas Stovall served many more years and became lieutenant governor when Julian Carroll was governor. He was absent from the state when the legislature passed a resolution rescinding the Equal Rights Amendment. Thomas Stovall, as the acting governor, vetoed the resolution. In the end, the amendment fell 3 states short of the required 38 state approvals for adoption. I tell this true story for 2 reasons. First, so you understand that as difficult as it was back then, it was a breeze compared to accomplishing what I am proposing. Second, you can think about all of the difficulties this nation has experienced because the job didn't get done 45 years ago, and ask yourself, how bad will it be if we don't get it done now? You should each consider the issue of whether every one of us is equal to every other one of us or not. Virtually every war that we have ever fought as human beings has had in its makeup the idea that those guys aren't equal to me. Virtually all of the things that we have, from slavery to stealing land from Native Americans and on and all, they all stem from those people are less than I am. No one is less in terms of their value before the law. No one is more. We all know the world doesn't quite work that way. Wealthy people get their way a lot more than the rest of us do. Minorities get their way less than most of us do. It doesn't work that way, and it never will work that way until we, all of us, all of we, say no, it has to be that way. I ask you to think long and hard and seriously about this issue. It is imperative to the future of our country, and for that matter, of our world. Reminder, a word about my book, Ubuntu, I Am Because We Are, which is available on Amazon and wherever books are sold, and presents the only peaceful method available to redirect where we are headed. Check it out on my website, johnkelch.com. That's JOHNKOELSCH.com. And by the way, Ubuntu is spelled Ubuntu. Ubuntu, I Am Because We Are. Check it out. Thank you for listening today.